Well, awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this evening so that we could highlight in this program some really important work that's happening in our region and throughout the country. It's the Thriving Communities Program and the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers, which are referred to affectionately as the TICTACs. And they were part of the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed by President Biden in 2022. The biggest and boldest investment in our nation's history ever that is taking action on climate change. And the Affordable Clean Energy Plan in the IRA works by incentivizing people, businesses, nonprofits, and communities to make greener choices. The Inflation Reduction Act is paving a way for a cleaner, more resilient future, and it demonstrates that environmental policy can be a win-win for both our wallets and our planet. The TICTACs are based on EPA regions. So in Region 2, which covers New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, the TICTAC is covered by We Act for Environmental Justice. In EPA Region 3, which covers Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Washington, D.C., the TICTAC is covered by the National Wildlife Federation and is represented tonight by the Overbrook Education Center, who is serving as the Philadelphia hub. In the moments ahead, you're going to hear how the TICTACs work and how communities and nonprofits can benefit. Again, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we're going to do our best to answer them. This is being recorded, so it'll be available if you want to share it with your friends or review any of the excellent information that's presented a little bit later or at another time. That's fine. We're also going to be sending out links in the chat, so if you want to open that up, that will be helpful as we go through too. But lastly, before I turn it over to our first speaker to give us a brief overview of the Inflation Reduction Act itself, I want to thank our many co-sponsors who made tonight possible. First, the South Baltimore Land Trust, the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, Latino Action Network Foundation, the NAACP New Brunswick, Isles Incorporated, New Jersey Progressive Equitable Energy Coalition, the Center for Environmental Transportation, the Outdoor Equity Alliance, South Burlington Community, NAACP, the Newark Green Team, PennFuture, and ReImagine Appalachia. In addition, the hosts working together in this area and the speakers include ourselves at New Jersey LCV. My name is Ed Potasnik, and I have the pleasure to be the Executive Director of New Jersey LCV, the Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania, New York LCV, Maryland LCV, We Act for Environmental Justice, and Overbrook Educational Center. This work wouldn't be possible without partnering with such great organizations. So now I'm going to turn it over to Matt Salton, who's our Federal Campaigns Manager for New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland LCV.
Thanks so much. So I just want to go briefly through the Inflation Reduction Act, kind of a broad lens of it, before we launch into the specific TICTAC program. Next slide. So basically, I like to start these out with talking about what actually is the Inflation Reduction Act, because it's such a monumental and it's a very big bill. When we hear about it, we tend to hear about it either in terms of the healthcare provisions, which cap prices when negotiating Medicare drug costs, or we tend to hear about the clean energy and environment area of the bill. So we like to refer to it as the Affordable Clean Energy Plan in the Inflation Reduction Act, and it has to do with clean energy, transportation, agriculture, healthy communities, buildings, clean manufacturing, and public lands and waters. All of this comes together through a myriad of incentives, through tax credits, through rebates, through grants and loans. Next slide. So we like to push this resource out to folks. It's called the Rewiring America IRA Calculator from our friends at Rewiring America. And next slide. What this will do is that you input your zip code, whether you own or rent your home, your household income, how you file when you file your taxes, and how big your household size is. And they can give you an estimate of what you might be eligible for in the consumer benefits. So as you can see for this specific individual, and this is all based on area median income, because that way, if you live in a state or a community that tends to be higher income, but might not necessarily help you because everything is more expensive in your area. We see this in a lot of the states represented here tonight, like New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and parts of Pennsylvania. This way, everyone in every community, the middle and low income folks, will be able to tap into these benefits. So for these specific people that we did earlier, they can see up to $14,000 in upfront discounts in the form of rebates that will be available soon. I'll get to that in a minute. About $4,250 in tax credits that are available now. And through doing all of these things, because you're getting more efficient systems for your home, you're spending less energy to heat your home and to power your home, you're going to save money in the long term, and estimated savings of $1,150 a year, totaling around $20,000. So before I go into the specifics, I just wanted to cover the difference between a tax credit and a rebate. So a tax credit is if you owe federal taxes, you can then purchase something that will help make your home more energy efficient. And then you can get that back in the form of a tax credit when you file your taxes. So for an example, the electric vehicle tax credit, you can get back $7,500 depending on where it was made and different things about the battery. You can claim that on your taxes, and then you can get that in the form of tax credit. But then an example of a rebate is when you go to purchase something at the dealership, let's say. Now, actually, with the electric vehicle tax credit, you can get that now in the form of a rebate. So when you buy a car, you can get that $7,500 tax credit off. But an additional one is, let's say you're in New York, there's an additional $2,000 rebate off the purchase price of an electric vehicle. So tax credit, you have to wait for your taxes. Rebates you can get right at the store, and it will come off right as you buy it. So these are the different tax credits available in the IRA right now. So if you wanted to get a battery storage installation system, if you wanted to get geothermal heating in your home, like I said, the new electric vehicle, if you want to get solar on your roof. For the first time, we have a used electric vehicle tax credit, which is exciting, of $4,000 because so many people don't go out and purchase new vehicles, they get used. A heat pump system, like I said, a heat pump, for anyone who doesn't know, is like an air conditioner, except it also heats too. So it heats and cools, both powered by electricity, and it's very efficient. So you're exhausting less energy to use it, and you'll save money in the long term. And it's just a lot better way to heat and cool your home rather than having a separate central air or window units and a boiler in the basement. But then there's also a heat pump water heater. There's money for weatherization to make your home a bit more insulated. So when you heat it in the winter, the heat stays in. When you cool it in the summer, the cool stays in. Electric vehicle charger, $1,000 for that, because if you get an electric vehicle, you're going to want to charge it at your home. And when you're doing all these things in your home, you're getting new appliances that all work off electricity. That's going to cause you to need a better electrical panel, and so that there's money in there for that as well. And then the electrification rebates, which are not available yet, we're expecting these toward the very end of the year, maybe early next year, but these will be all off the purchase price when you get it. So these things are like heat pumps. In addition to the tax credits, you can get rebates, updating your electrical panel, different efficiency rebates to make your home more efficient, new electric wiring, getting that heat pump water heater, weatherizing your home to make it more efficient, an electric or induction stove, which will increase the quality of your indoor air, and a heat pump clothes dryer, because people actually don't realize a lot of clothes dryers still run on gas. So getting all these things to run on electricity, and then making sure that you're exhausting less energy in the process. So this is just a nice visual to look at what we're talking about here. These are all the different things in a person's home that they can potentially benefit from the IRA. So all the things I just listed there kind of visually laid out, and we'll send around these slides afterward as well. And finally, what we're talking about tonight, Healthy Communities portion of the IRA through the $3 billion Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grants Program. Again, like Ed mentioned, through We Act for Environmental Justice in EPA Region 2, through National Wildlife Federation in EPA Region 3 with their regional hub partners, with Overbrook Educational Center in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and South Baltimore Community Land Trust in Maryland. So they will be the Tic Tacs, and they will be doing the presentation after me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Matt, for the overview. There's a lot in the IRA, and I know there's already a lot of questions in the Q&A box. So if you, at any time, have a question, definitely put it in there. We're trying to answer some of them as they come. I'll try to do a quick overview of some of the answers of the questions that probably are on other people's minds. But really, at any time, just go into that question and answer box and feel free to add into that for the discussion at the end. Now we're going to hear from Jordana Vesterselt. She is the Tic Tac Director of Operations at WEAC Environmental Justice in New York City. And she'll later be joined by her colleague, Shireen Cox, who is the Tic Tac Federal Grant Specialist. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Awesome. So again, I'm Jordana Vanderselt with our Tic Tac team at WEAC. I'm the Director of Operations. I'll let Shireen introduce herself.
Good afternoon, Shireen Cox, Federal Grant Specialist at the WEAC Tic Tac. It's very nice to be here.
Next slide. So I believe Ed spoke briefly about, just grounding us in where the IRA came from. I don't know if we mentioned the Justice 40 initiative, but really just to sort of orient everyone. Justice 40, is the mandate that says that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments, like the IRA, like the bipartisan infrastructure law, have to flow down to marginalized, underserved, and overburdened communities. So the Tic Tac program, which is here the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center program, is a nationwide initiative where they've essentially set up these virtual technical assistant hubs in each of the EPA regions to really be that mechanism to, help folks actually access the amount of money that's available right now for, environmental, energy and climate justice initiatives. And there are 18 Tic Tacs across the country. But of course, Shireen and I are with Region 2. So that's what, we're really going to focus on today. Next slide. Thanks. So our WEAC Region 2 Tic Tac, we are up and running until 2028. We're a 5-year-long funded program here to really support folks in New York and New Jersey. So I will mention that EPA Region 2 actually, so it includes New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. However, they've sort of split up our region, and we have a partner, Tic Tac, who is serving folks in Puerto Rico and the USVI, whereas we at WEAC, by the way, we're a Harlem, Manhattan-based nonprofit. We are really here to serve New York and New Jersey, the full states, and 8 Indian nations that are represented in New York, actually. So I'll briefly mention, sort of our general format for technical assistance and how we're really showing up to provide this kind of support to organizations. We have a monthly curriculum of trainings. So I think I go into some of those topics a little later, but those trainings are sort of general, maybe high level, suitable for almost anyone to, again, be briefed in different climate issues as they relate to health or different, energy or environmental justice issues. We have on-demand technical assistance. So we'll show you later an intake form that we have live on our website. Different groups are able to submit, their needs through that intake form. you can tell us a little about maybe a project idea that you have that you want to get funded, or you can just talk about an issue area that you're seeing in your community, and we can help you flesh out a project around that, or possibly refer you to one of our partners who have expertise in, you know, whatever you're really coming to us with. And we're not, you know, we don't just meet with people one time and that's it. Many of the groups who have already reached out to us, we have ongoing relationships with. We're meeting, you know, multiple times. We're providing quick email answers to whatever they, you know, are searching for. So we're very much an open revolving door. And then soon we'll be setting up in-person regional convenings. These again would be in New York State and New Jersey State. And eventually we'll have a resource library. Right now we have a ton of resources on our website, like past training recordings and slides. But we're also developing some sort of like grants management tools, grants application tools and whatnot. So we will have those available sometime shortly. And who can we serve? We can serve almost everyone, as you can see from this list. Obviously, you know, the TICTACs were stood up to serve environmental justice communities. So the goal or the aim is to be serving, you know, nonprofits or CBOs who live and work in environmental justice communities, or serving organizations that serve or benefit environmental justice communities. But we're not limited to type of organization, as you can see from this list. So that's probably just good to note. Next slide. And so I mentioned our partners in terms of folks that we could refer people to. Our partners also help us to deliver the trainings that I was mentioning, the monthly trainings. So just so everyone can see the partners that we have available, we act as sort of acting as our grassroots org representative for New York. But over in New Jersey, we have 2 EJ nonprofits with long-standing history in the community, South Ward Environmental Alliance and New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. They've already been helpful with things like a training around community organizing, and a training around organizational growth and how to really strategically take advantage of funding opportunities to grow from a very small nonprofit. We have some academic partners, NYU School of Law and Columbia Climate School have been particularly helpful with their environmental policy and regulatory knowledge. So, if groups are seeking help around those issues, or maybe developing a project where they need to know, like, what is the local law here and how do I push this project through, or who do I need to partner with to actually implement this? They're very knowledgeable in that. And then we also have, sorry, can you go back? Thank you. And then we also just have these broad national nonprofits that we're relying on. Clean Energy Group is obviously our energy expert. And Environmental Protection Network, folks may be familiar with. They are comprised of some 600, I think, former EPA employees. And they are super helpful with one-on-one TA in any type of, issue area, water, air, power plant transition, anything that you could think of. They probably have a former EPA employee. So those are our partners. And our technical assistance areas. So this slide really just dives into exactly, you know, the types of things that when you come to us through that intake form that we can help you with. Shireen is obviously our grants expert and in charge of this big box on the left-hand side. So navigating and applying to grants. I'll mention we're not, of course, you know, the aim of the TICTACs is really to help folks access this federal money, but we're not limited to helping just with federal grants or funding opportunities. We, you know, can focus in on state or city grants or even private funding if that, you know, is the best fit for, say, your project that you have in mind. So here it says, yes, identifying and understanding RFPs, developing concepts, developing strong proposals. We can assist with grant review, you know, just in help with following a very complicated NOFO and understanding each component that you need to submit so that you don't lose points on anything. So that sort of stuff. And then moving over, you know, we can, of course, assist with EJ policy and regulatory analysis. I mentioned our academic partners in that regard. Energy justice and energy projects, community organizing, you know, how best to engage with decision makers, how to mobilize community in that manner, and then building partnerships. A lot of groups come to us and need help with partnership development. WeAct in particular, you know, has an environmental health department that has a lot of different resources or trainings we can provide kind of on the science of climate and health and energy as well. And then conducting EJ needs assessments and post-grants management. So of course, right now, I think a lot of what we're focused on across the country is applying to or, you know, having the capacity to apply to grants, but then managing them once you receive them, hopefully, is just a whole other, you know, issue area that we can help you tackle in terms of, you know, reporting and financial guidelines that you'll need to follow. So next slide. And I mentioned, you know, again, our monthly trainings that we host. We have a lot that we've been holding since November, I believe. The TICTACs launched recently. We launched in basically the end of October. So when you get these slides afterwards, or no, they're in the chat. Yes, thank you. So our archive trainings can be found on our website. The topics here, you know, are on community solar, community organizing. The CGES tool was a great training. If folks need, if folks have not heard of the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, it's a GIS mapping tool. Organizational growth, I think I mentioned that. And then we recently had a training on clean air and climate. For our upcoming trainings, I just wanted to highlight one in May and one in June that are very much, you know, grants focused or funding focused. So in May, we're going to be having a virtual fundraising training. Here you can sort of, well, in the chat, I'm sure they've dropped the links, but this will really help in exploring sources, behaviors, and trends of potential donors to really develop those fundraising strategies for your organization. And then in June, we have an in-person offering. So we have a 2-day in-person training, one in a New York location, one in a New Jersey location, where folks will really be able to go through, again, at these links, it goes through every single topic that you'd get at this in-person training, but it takes you basically from start to finish in terms of writing or gathering those application materials that you might need, focused on a large federal grant. So like a very complicated grant. Next slide. And then this is just our last slide in terms of how to connect with us. So we have QR codes on the screen. This first one, request technical assistance, is like I said, folks can fill out this quick survey just to tell us a little bit about your organization or your group and what you're needing assistance with, you know, defining the issue area that you're, you know, wishing to tackle or the project idea you have. And we review those within 5 business days and get back to you to set up an initial meeting to really talk through exactly what you need, and then refer you to either Shireen to write a grant or to one of our partners. And yes, the rest of these QR codes on the screen here are, you know, our training opportunities. On our website, we try to consolidate some major funding opportunities that are available. And with those funding opportunities, we're putting out a bi-weekly newsletter as well. So you can sign up to be on that newsletter and get basically funding opportunities on an ongoing basis. So I think that's all we had for you. And Shireen's going to be available for Q&A.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much. There's so much happening and so much opportunity. And, you know, quite frankly, the work at the TICTACs to help bridge the gap between, you know, local communities and community organizations and families and businesses, it's just critical. So we really appreciate that. Now we're going to hear from Jerome Shabazz. He's the executive director of the Overlook Environmental Education Center in Philadelphia, and he's overseeing the regional TICTAC hub established by the National Wildlife Federation. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ed. Appreciate it. So I think Jordana really did a great job of talking about the higher level interest of where TICTAC resided from. But I'll go over a few other items. You know, the Clean Air Act Section 138 was the program requirement that enabled the TICTAC, or the Thriving Community Technical Assistance Center program. This was a pretty substantial investment, $2.8 billion for the program, $2 billion for grants, $200 million for applications and implementation, evaluation, and technical assistance. And so this is probably one of the larger investments that's directed to and create opportunity for communities who are most vulnerable and in most of need of these resources. And so awards for the TICTACs will create eligibility around September the 30th, 2026, and the grantee proposals must be implemented within 5 years. So, you know, we have a little time now to ramp up, to scale up, and to make our organizations known and available to the constituents that we're serving in our respective regions. Next, please. So the grants, there were 4 types of grants that came out of Clean Air Act Section 138. There are pollution remediation and prevention, workforce development that's primarily tied to air pollution, greenhouse gas reductions, climate adaptation and resiliency, indoor air pollution, mitigating climate and health, heat island impacts or heat-related issues, and the technical assistance that we're providing as a Thriving Community Technical Assistance Center is related primarily to those 5 broad areas. Although as we began to do our work, they really drill down to more specific benefits to communities. Next. And so the grants and technical assistance it sort of is in 4 buckets for us. One is assessments, helping communities better understand where opportunities are, helping to do asset mapping to identify where capacity building is possible, planning and project development, helping communities, particularly those who are under-resourced, with planning for grants, understanding how grant processes work, agencies, connecting them with those agencies, and the nuance around how to apply from an agency to agency perspective. The third bucket is pilots and partnerships. Very important for many applicants who are seeking federal funding to understand exactly what collaborative partnerships mean. All of the federal NOFOs or the requests for proposals are essentially seeking out these sort of partnership models where community groups are working with institutions and academic communities and even policymakers in some instances to fulfill their environmental and climate objectives. And implementation, a great deal of our resource is built around the evaluation and reporting and helping organizations understand what that reporting structure looks like, and in some cases in that post-award space. Next slide, please. So technical assistance, application and evaluation. Technical assistance for us is providing support for application development, grant writing, reporting, bookkeeping, all of the due diligence that's necessary to not only get a grant, but to be able to maintain it once you receive it. But most importantly, for those who have had the benefit of this type of resource, it creates operational clarity. And what is very difficult for under-resourced or small or emerging nonprofit is understanding the nature of what this process is going to entail and to create a sense of expectation around it. And so the secondary thing is we go through is the understanding and deconstructing the application process itself. It's a very daunting process for many. Some need to understand the antecedents or the areas by which you need to prepare for in order to even be eligible for grant making, such as having a SAMS number, and some cases needing a 501c3 or a DUNS number, just those basic preparatory and structural acquisitions that are necessary in order for your grant making to be successful. And finally, in the technical assistance and application evaluation space, we also help with reporting and to be able to identify how to deal with long-term tracking, looking at community benefits, creating logic models, identifying what programmatic outcomes are, with tracking cumulative impacts or many other measures that enable you to determine in a very community-facing or public-facing way what the benefits of your grant work is yielding for you and the community. Next slide, please. And so the notice of funding opportunity considerations, we expect to see a great deal of NOFOs issued throughout not only this summer, but throughout the next subsequent years. We've already have seen an earlier submission beyond the technical assistance centers, the grant makers. So there are as many regions that have received support for technical assistance. There are regions who have now received grants for those who can reissue grants. And so that's a great opportunity and a great source of preparation for what the thriving community technical assistance grants opportunities can prepare you for. The grant makers, in addition to additional NOFOs that will be issued, that we're expecting to be issued from many federal agencies. Next slide, please. So our TIC-TAC programmatic goals and outcomes are essentially to work across multiple sectors. In our TIC-TAC, we'll talk in a second about how we're delineated in Region 3, in the Mid-Atlantic region, where we work across multiple sectors in one community area. We attempt to be flexible for those eligible entities. We work with government and community together. Collaborative modeling, knowledge co-production is a big part of our methodology. We're very hypersensitive of making certain there's a community voice associated with our deliberation of work, to the extent that we're one of the few TIC-TACs to have a very extensive community hub modeling. We have a hub and spoke model where a parent organization is actually the principal operator or the applicant, where there's subsequent hubs throughout the region that have deeply rooted ties and geographic relationships with communities to better serve those communities that we reside. We have community engagement around all projects that include clean energy. We have wraparound services. The same as Jordana indicated, we don't necessarily just intend to drop a client with a one or done. It's more about helping to create capacity and to produce more resources for those communities, more capacity to seek resources with the communities that we serve. Connect workforce to all the projects, have a multi-pronged approach, multi-centered approach on resilience. It includes a great deal of sectors from clean air, water, green jobs, housing, et cetera. And all of our community partners are involved in these very exclusive decision-making issues that relate to their respective geographic areas and the benefits thereof. Next slide, please. So we integrate health outcomes and health across the project. We look at outcomes. We look at areas where we can help strengthen proposals and applications by enabling our constituents to connect with existing resources, whether it's the CGIS tools, whether it's the EJ screens, whether it's the national EJ clearinghouse tools to enable applications to really be strong around identifying outcomes that will benefit respective communities. Next slide. So resilience, mitigating indoor and outdoor pollution, workforce development is an example of some of the areas where we have a great deal of resource within our network to be supportive of grant making in these particular areas. Next slide, please. Okay, let's go next slide. I know we're sort of running short on time. Next slide. Okay, so we understand that the formation of the TIC-TACs really has a combination of funding that comes from the EPA as well as the Department of Energy. There are 3 national TIC-TACs, and we have regional TIC-TACs. So the TIC-TACs that you've heard from today was Region 2, and I'm talking more particularly about Region 3. Next slide. And so the example of our services, not exclusive to what you've seen earlier in Region 2, grant proposal writing and preparation assistance, managing federal grants and accounting policies, navigating SAMS.gov and the grants.gov registration processes, identifying funding sources, whether it's local, state, or federal, and most importantly, developing the partnerships and coalitions to help carry out your work. Next slide. And so this is a little snapshot of the Region 3 TIC-TAC formation. Our project lead is the National Wildlife Federation, and the The co-facilitator is the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice and Health. We call it SIEGE, and the Maryland Environmental Finance Center. And so essentially the co-facilitators in our Region 3 are National Wildlife Federation and the Center and the University of Maryland through their SIEGE and Environmental Finance Center departments. We have 8 at this point hubs that are very intentionally focusing on the geographic areas that we serve. In Mid-Atlantic region, we have Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, DC, and Pennsylvania, and we have multiple hubs within some of those respective areas. Is where the Overbrook Environmental Education Center is focused more on Delaware and the Greater Philadelphia region. And I think we're right at time, but if you are interested in inquiring about technical assistance and or volunteering, we have tiers of affiliation of people who are of the greater need, and for those who may want to receive resources, but we also have a third tier that enables folks to be able to provide assistance and collaborative support as well. So again, we can, through the Q&A, talk about how to do intake and to reconnect with our Region 3 technical assistance resources after we get to that section of the presentation. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, for the work that you're doing. We're going to go over to sort of a panel setup. A number of great questions have come in. So if you still have a question, or now that you've heard the presentations, a question comes to mind, please do take a second and put it in the Q&A. A number of questions were sort of typed. Some folks were sort of answering questions. One question that came up in a couple different forms were around nonprofits, and sort of the first part of the presentation, Matt Salton went over some of the IRA benefits and talked about tax kind of things. And one of the questions was a first aid squad in Bridgewater. I'm assuming it's Bridgewater, New Jersey, where I taught high school chemistry. That was my previous career before working to protect the environment, which is hard to learn with polluted environment. But there's a first aid squad and heard tax deduction, and I think they're nonprofits. So does that work? And I know, Matt, you did respond to that, but that might be something folks here would benefit from hearing. Maybe they're volunteers in their community or churches, et cetera. You know, what is available for nonprofits in the social welfare arena in the space of the Inflation Reduction Act? That was the first presentation.
Yeah, so one of the major things about the Inflation Reduction Act, like I went over, is all of these tax credits that are available. And like I mentioned, for an individual, you have to owe something in federal taxes to then benefit from that credit. And so one of the big things that the IRA did that we actually don't hear that much about is something called elective pay or direct pay. And this allows tax-exempt institutions like nonprofit entities, schools, churches, to actually benefit from these tax credits. And so it's run through the IRS. It's called direct pay. I'll put a link to it in the chat for everybody. And it allows these tax-exempt institutions to get the tax credit, but just to receive the benefit without having owed those federal taxes. So this allows schools to get electric school buses. There are a few different grant opportunities there as well, but this helps finance those kinds of projects. It helps churches and nonprofits to get solar panels for their buildings, things like that. So I'm really glad, Ed, that you brought that up based on that question, and I'll put more info about it in the chat for folks to learn more.
And it's also, in some cases, government entities. So like
Yes.
municipalities, they don't pay taxes. They collect taxes. People always gripe about that. But nonetheless, they could save taxpayers money if they can get to recover the federal funds. That is also available in a number of these programs. So just, I think that's really awesome. And then there were some logistical questions that came up from folks. Things like, are we going to get a copy of these slides? The answer is yes. Then there was like an even more investigative question. These are great links. I can't really copy all of the chat. Will we get a copy of the links? And so I'm just going to make the request. We're going to send up a follow-up email with a link to the video and the PowerPoint, any unanswered questions, that we also include the links that we've pasted into the chat function for folks to easily access a lot of these resources. So we appreciate that. And then a quick thing on electric vehicles, like how much does a charger cost, et cetera. It varies because we're doing this across 4 different states. So I can only speak to New Jersey, but in New Jersey, it's about $500 for an electric vehicle charger and $1,500 to install it. You may need an upgrade of your electric panel depending on how many things you have. There's also a program for that. PSE&G, which I know because it's my electric provider, provides a $250 rebate for the charger. So that cuts that price in half, and up to $1,500 of on-bill credit for the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the wiring for the electrician. You need a permit and everything, which almost gets it to you for free. I can guarantee you that's not going to be around for a long time, as more and more are around and becoming available. So I would say take advantage of it. In New Jersey, we're already seeing some of the incentives go away. For example, New Jersey electric vehicles have no sales tax this year. Little by little, that sales tax is going to go and come back online, and some other things like that. So as more and more electric vehicles are adopted, these programs will become less and less available. So that's something to think about. And then there was a number of questions from folks about who's the right person to get in touch with. We heard a lot about all the great resources and training and the authentic sort of ways the TICTACs are working in communities to make sure funds are having the most benefit, and talking about the infrastructure of smaller organizations and lifting that up. If some of the folks that were on here have a question, do they go to Shireen and just call her up on the phone, or send an email, or Jerome or Jordana? What's the sort of best way? Help us navigate. I don't know who can speak to that a little bit, but
can I jump in quickly? Because
yeah.
Ours is pretty straightforward. If you go to the National Wildlife Federation's website, there's an intake a portal, and the intake portal will integrate you into our system. It will help to flush out what your requests are, what your needs are, how we could best serve you, and we will be in accordance. We'll respond in accordance with your requests.
Okay, because Paya had asked that question, and there was, I think, a whole list of organizations, and maybe they got confused to whether to click those. So use the intake portal.
Yes, that's the beauty, that's the elegance of the intake portal, is that you don't have to think about which community hub to communicate with. Just go right to National Wildlife Federation, and it'll route effectively based on your request. It'll route your community part, route you to the community part. You don't have to figure that part out.
Perfect. And that will be the same for New York? That's what you're saying?
Yep.
Yep.
So just visiting our ReAct TICTAC website, we have a similar intake form that then, puts you in our system, and we contact you within 7 days, 5 business days.
Very nice. Well, they got a little clock timer on that.
Yeah, we time ourselves.
That's awesome. And some folks had also asked specific questions. I think, Jordana, in relation to the presentations you talked about, particularly the EPA tool that looks at the mapping. And I think you pointed to some, I guess maybe it was like recordings of other trainings. And they're just asking, is there a way to get a demo for that? Or is that something that watching the training is enough? This was a question from Beth.
Right. So I imagine we're talking about I mentioned the CJUST tool. Yeah, so it's that climate and economic justice tool that's a GIS map. And one of the archived trainings on our website, we did do a live demo. So it's like an hour-long training recording where they went through some, background on the tool and how to use it, or some nuances about it, I should say. And then we did do a live demo. So that is recorded.
Okay, awesome. And then there's a number of questions in here too about different sort of ways in more urban areas to sort of reclaim concrete and pavement and bring it back to more natural vegetative state. So like tree planting or allowing the land to once again absorb the water and do the filtration process, prevent flooding. So cooling, a tree planting, turning parking lots into cooling zones. Is that part of any of the grant funding streams that are available or programs?
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Jerome.
No, absolutely. It's your time. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Now there's currently the Community Change Grant has a strategy for green spaces. Depending on the scale and your organization's capacity, there'll be an excellent opportunity for folks to take advantage of. There's also some green space urban garden funding opportunities through the USDA. So there are a number of funding opportunities. I'm happy to meet with the individual that asked about that, and we can, if they're in New York and New Jersey.
Okay. Jonathan, I don't know where you are, but you have an offer
Yeah.
for me. So
Happy to walk you through what opportunities are available for your green space project.
that would have been a good thing for me to do, to tell people to change their name and just put a little comma with their state. So we could kind of, I guess we learn it in this opportunity. I think this question from Kaki also addresses sort of something that Matt had talked about, which is, could school districts or municipalities serve as projects? And if they partner with a C3 organization, I think it's a little different than the tax credit side, but in the local partnerships or in the local community groups, if you are a small nonprofit, you didn't have a C3 status or what have you, can you partner with a school district, or can a school district partner with a nonprofit and go in on projects together? I think that's what Kaki's getting at with this question.
Well, it depends. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say that's more of a question for our Tic Tacs.
Yeah, I think it's for grant opportunities. It doesn't say that specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, so it really depends on the NOFO and how it's spelled out.
Okay.
But what you're seeing currently is that there is this emphasis around collaborative partnerships and identifying entities that can help you better leverage your programmatic activities within communities. And there are situations where partners are academic. In some cases, they're governments and policymakers, along with CBOs and environmental justice organizations. And so look closely at those announcements so that you can determine whether or not that type of collaboration is ineligible. But in many cases, those collaborative partnerships are eligible. So don't rule it out of hand. It's definitely something you want to investigate.
That's really good to know, because Adam also asked a similar question. Does a company need to be a nonprofit? Do they have to partner with a state agency? Sort of, I think that your answer gets to that as well. Is there anything for folks within the business community, roles that they could play in any of these, or is this strictly more in the NGO, government, community-based organization space? They mentioned the word company, so I thought, I didn't hear that tonight. I wasn't.
There are some for-profit, some grants that are have for-profit entities as eligible applicants. We just need to explore more about what the project is, and although they're not as many, but there are some grants that allow for for-profit organizations to apply.
Okay, awesome. And then there were a number of questions that were answered. Let me just see. A lot of accolades people really appreciated hearing. So I just say to our panel, thank you very much for taking the time this evening to share a little bit about, I guess, look under the hood, as they say, in what is probably pretty complicated with the different funding streams. But more than anything, welcoming folks to reach out and being available to answer questions and explore opportunities to improve communities. One of the questions that came up around, this might go back to the IRA too. Folks who live in apartments versus own their home. This is less on the community-based organizations. And Matt, you had answered that. You want to give a little bit more, because I think those of us who work at organizations, we also live somewhere. So we're thinking about the calculator you showed and thinking, oh, is my heating system going to go, et cetera. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And this might be our last question. I'll wrap up with some more contact information.
Sure thing. Like I mentioned, for the tax credits, you need taxes owed. For those, you need to be an owner of a property. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you're getting a tax credit, it's because you're going to be paying taxes on that property. If you're renting, you're not paying property taxes, so there's nothing to get a credit back on. What you will be eligible for is when the rebates come out at the very end of this year or early next year. New York is the first state that will be rolling these out. We're expecting sometime during the summer, and then later will the other states come. But the rebates, so things like the induction stove, heat pump, those upfront discounts, we can expect for folks in apartment buildings to have access to it. But the most important thing there is to either work with your building manager and your co-op board, or your landlord to do these kinds of things, just because typically renters don't go out and replace their stove just willy-nilly if it's not actually their property.
Timmy had asked this question, maybe this, Jerome, you might know this. Are there any trainings in the Southern New Jersey area, i.e. like Camden or below?
Well, okay, go ahead.
You want to get that, Jordana?
Because actually, Jersey is not in Region 3.
Oh, of course. It makes sense, right? Because it's right there. But of course, I knew that.
I know. Yeah. And it's interesting. Jerome, and our regions, I mean, we're our neighbors. So
Yeah, of course. I knew that.
The EPA regions the boundaries are silly ultimately. But so Camden, New Jersey. So actually, year 2, which is starting in July, we're really going to start to focus on more regional in-person convenings, meaning like we're going to try to set up in-person events or trainings in like each of the regions across New York State and each within New Jersey State. So I'm sure Camden will be on our list at some point. I don't know if
the best thing that they can do is really sign up to get that newsletter that you're sending out every 2 weeks, and they'll see the upcoming events and what ones are in their area. And I think that's an awesome tool. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today, the folks who joined to participate, but of course our presenters for the work that they do every day. We recorded this evening's program, and we're going to send it out in an email follow-up. We're going to send out those links and the PowerPoint as well. If you didn't get a chance to answer your question, we're going to do our best to follow up with you. And again, thank you to our co-sponsors, and a special thanks to We Act Environmental Justice and Overbrook Educational Center for their dedication to our communities and serving as these technical assistance centers. We really appreciate it and wish you all the best of luck, and continue to partner together with the LCVs in the area to make this a successful and deliver the kinds of needed benefits. So thank you all very much. Have a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you all back soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.